This is a Martha's Collection feature, as it is one of the items from the collection that was donated to me by a follower. This particular dress is made out of a woven semi-sheer fabric. It's either going to be a linen or a cotton. I'm not quite certain which one yet. And it is accented with velvet ribbon and beautiful lace. It's a soft green shade, and it has lace inset in the sleeves, which actually that may have been a later addition. Has a midi collar, which is a square collar in the back, and this was a popular feature in the 1910s, so I do believe this dress is from that era. It doesn't need too much for repairs, but there is some missing lace on one of the sleeves. It was completely gone from one sleeve, so I'm carefully removing that lace, and then made some repairs before I'm going to attempt any cleaning, because as you know, a stitch in time saves 9. So first, I'm going to check on the color fastness of this. I'm not so concerned with the woven fabric, but this velvet trim, I think, could be an issue, so I did a little color test, and from what I can tell from that, what came off onto the paper towel, I believe, was just dirt. So I am going to... I wasn't really quite sure what to use for cleaning. I know that this needed freshening because, of course, when items get to be a certain age, they do start to smell. So in order just to give it a general cleaning and then also to help with the smell, I decided to soak it in vinegar. A lot of what I looked online suggested doing a 50-50 mix of vinegar and water. I was a little too concerned that would be too strong. Again, I know that this is probably from the 1910s, so I wanted to be a little more conservative, and I did 2 cups within, it was about 5 to 6 gallons of water. I'm putting it on my handmade mesh rack that is out of PVC pipe and athletic mesh, and that kind of allows me to move it up and down a little bit. And look at what came out of that water. I do think a lot of that was the nap from the velvet trim in addition to the dirt, so you can see that black residue left behind. So I know I'm definitely cleaning some of the dirt off, but I don't want to get too crazy with soaking because I don't want to deteriorate the velvet at all. So there's general kind of discolorations throughout the dress, but on the bottom of it, of the skirt, is a really dark rust-looking stain. And so as you'll see here, I tried many things to try to remedy that. The first thing I'm going to try is, again, back to vinegar. So I misted it with vinegar and then took this white cloth here, which is cotton, and soaked it in vinegar and then laid that on top for 5 minutes just to kind of let it work its way in. And then I have a very soft brush, and I continue to work on those areas with the brush. And as I'm doing this, it's not really getting anything onto the white. So I'm going to move on to baking soda and sprinkling that on the worst areas. And then I put some of the vinegar in a spray bottle so I could do an easier application. And you can see it doing its little science magic there with the reaction between the vinegar and the baking soda. And let that sit. And I do see a little bit of the black coming off on the velvet ribbon. So I am going to try another idea, and I'm doing equal parts of cream of tartar and vinegar as well. And then I took a toothbrush and just applied it to that area, rinsed it off, didn't do anything. So now this is kind of my trusted go-to, but I wasn't quite sure how this would work on, or, if I should, on something this old. But I just did a little bit on the hem just as an experiment. And this actually worked the best of anything. It wasn't 100%, but it did improvement. But I decided to try another attempt with lemon juice, salt, and the sun. I used lemon juice from a squeeze bottle because the lemons that I had in the fridge were going to be for dinner tonight. So I tried the juice in a bottle variety, and then with salt, and then there wasn't really much for sun today. It was kind of more windy than sunny. But I let that sit for a while, brushed it off, and it didn't do anything. At this point, I'm beginning to think this is actually stain. It doesn't seem to be anything food related, but I'm going to try one more thing. And this is something I've never tried before. So the glycerin I got from the drugstore, and then doing distilled water and vinegar, making a solution with that, and then putting it on, applying it with a brush and kind of trying to work it through the fibers, and then with the cloth underneath or a paper towel. And then I decided, well, let's try soaking it in that solution. So I put it in another small container, and I did add a drop of Dawn, and then just kind of let it sit in this solution. Then I flipped it over to try to work it from the other side. And I did get a little bit more brown off. You can see there that quick flash on the paper towel, but it's just not budging. So I rinsed it off, and I'm going to do one more attempt because I'm stubborn. And I did my baking soda, Dawn peroxide solution, let it sit, rinse it off. I bumped up the temperature in the water for the rinse, and you can see that these spots are still there. They're better, but they're still there. So I'm giving up on that. So now just to give one more general soaking to, again, deodorize, clean, I did one more vinegar wash. And then I did a towel roll, air dried it, and then I'm just working at the skirt at this point and press those ruffles. Now on to the top. The lace was missing from the one sleeve. It was a very delicate, fine lace. And so I have a stash of vintage lace, and I have kind of a separate just for black laces. And in there, it's a different pattern, but it's definitely similar in its fineness to what the dress had originally. So I'm just going to give that a quick refresh, even though it's never been used, but it's been sitting around for a very long time, obviously. So I'm using Eucalan, and then just a 10-minute soak in cool water. Towel rolled it and let that air dry. So the top edge of the lace did have a little bit of breakage damage here and there, so I did turn that under and then press that. And I'm going to do a French seam to join the two. So you do wrong sides together first, trim the seam, and then you do right sides together, and this gives you a finished seam. And I could have done this by machine, but I did it by hand because I figured with the delicate nature of the lace that it was going to be a safer option. So I gathered that into the circle and then applied that by hand onto the sleeve. So here is the dress. She is cleaner now. She doesn't have any sort of vintage odor. I'm really so very happy that the velvet ribbon and that lace did not have any damage from cleaning, from the soaking that I did. I think this is an absolutely beautiful Edwardian gown. I love those stylized flowers. I'm not quite sure what those are. And there is still some discolorations that remain on this dress, but the overall presentation of it is just lovely. And even though it is over 110 years old, it's actually I would consider it wearable with care. I enjoyed working on this dress, and it's still beautiful 110 years later.